in our headlines on this Friday, June 27th, here in South Korea. The Trump administration's July deadline for country-specific tariffs may be extended according to recent remarks by the White House. Meanwhile, President Lee Jae-myung praises the country's patriots for their selfless service during a luncheon on this Friday at Cheong Wa Dae. And for those of you who have yet to make weekend plans, binge watching may be an option as Squid Game Season 3 has just hit the screen. The Trump administration's July deadline for country-specific tariffs may be extended, but its auto-related tariffs are set to be expanded. Lee Seung-jae has our top story.
Washington could extend its pause on reciprocal tariffs, which is set to expire next month. According to White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt on Thursday, the pause could be extended, but added that it's a decision for the president to make. The comments come as the temporary suspension of reciprocal tariffs, including 25% duties on South Korea, is set to expire on July 8th. In April, U.S. President Donald Trump announced the reciprocal tariffs to match those of other countries on U.S. goods. While the tariffs took effect on April 9th, Trump pressed the brakes on his plans for 90 days to allow for negotiations. Earlier this month, the U.S. president expressed his openness to extend the pause, but said that an extension might not be necessary. Meanwhile, Washington has begun a process to include more auto parts imported into the U.S. on the list of those subject to 25% tariffs. The U.S. Commerce Department's International Trade Administration on Thursday released its outlined process, where U.S. domestic producers may request additional auto parts to be included in the new tariff scheme. To receive the request from the domestic producers, the ITA is forming 2-week submission windows 4 times a year, with the first window opening on July 1st. Following the 2-week window, a non-confidential version of each valid request will be published, with the ITA making the final decision within 60 days of receiving the request. The move is expected to affect South Korea's auto parts industry. Earlier this year, Trump invoked Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, which grants the president the power to adjust imports into the U.S. when determined they threaten to impair national security. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
So, what does a potential U.S. extension in country-specific tariffs mean for South Korea? Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon asked a few pundits for their thoughts. Do take a listen.
The White House's comment on the tariff negotiation deadline comes after other recent signs that the possibility of a deadline delay was looming. White House economic advisor Stephen Myron had also said on Thursday local time that he thinks the tariff deadlines will likely be extended for countries that are making a genuine effort to negotiate trade deals with the U.S. He said that in such cases, he doesn't expect tariff rates to suddenly increase. Experts say this shows that things aren't going the way the U.S. expected when it comes to tariff negotiations.
Trump is in a tough spot. Things aren't going his way, especially on trade. Negotiations aren't producing the results he wanted, with tax policy issues in his hands as well. In terms of trade, nothing is working as he thought.
So far, the UK is the only country to have concluded its trade talks. South Korea, meanwhile, dispatched Trade Minister Yo Han-gu to Washington this week for high-level discussions, but no breakthrough has been announced. Observers say the delays could actually work in favor of the negotiating countries.
As the U.S. midterm elections approach, November next year, Washington's leverage weakens. That makes it more desperate to produce a deal it can sell to voters as a win, meaning it's giving off signals that it needs the deal more than the others do.
Analysts also argue that if the U.S. were confident about its position, it would have gone ahead with the reciprocal tariffs already announced earlier this year, rather than signaling a possible extension.
Trump has 2 options. Stick to the July 9 deadline and enforce reciprocal tariffs, or postpone them. But if the U.S. slaps on tariffs, prices on imported goods rise, and that could hurt American consumers. So instead, it's backing off.
Still, the White House isn't ruling anything out. The spokesperson also said President Trump could still opt for reciprocal tariffs if he believes they serve U.S. interests and benefit American workers. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The recent consensus by members of NATO to raise their defense spending by 5% of their respective GDP over the next decade is looking to have tangible implications on U.S. allies here in this part of the world, including South Korea. Our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young explains.
US President Donald Trump seems set to call on Asian allies to increase their defense budgets after European countries bow to his demand to hike their spending targets to 5% of gross domestic product. In a briefing on Thursday, White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt said if America's European allies in NATO can do it, then, quote, allies and friends in the Indo-Pacific region can do it too. Leavitt added that specific matters would be addressed by President Trump. The previous day, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, during its annual summit in the Netherlands, adopted a joint statement with all 32 member countries agreeing to raise their respective defense expenditures to a total of 5% of GDP by 2035. Representing South Korea, National Security Advisor Wi Song-lak attended the summit, after which he told the Korean media that NATO's defense increase reflects a broader trend and that similar demands are being made of Seoul. We said such demands are being discussed by working-level officials, but clarified they haven't yet established how the agenda would proceed. South Korea will have to decide how to respond, he said. US officials have recently been pushing for alliance modernization, which entails its security partners spending more on their defense, paying for the deployment of US strategic assets, and reassessing the role of American forces stationed abroad. US Acting Ambassador to Seoul Joseph Yun said on Wednesday that the two allies should address new areas concerning costs that are not covered in their bilateral defense cost-sharing agreement reached last year. Seoul appears to be maintaining caution amid sensitive discussions. The Foreign Ministry on Thursday released an official statement saying it will continue working closely with Washington to develop the alliance into a future-oriented, comprehensive strategic alliance that can respond to a changing security dynamic. A senior official told reporters that the two governments are engaging frequently at various levels. However, when asked whether the talks include defense spending or the cost of deploying strategic assets, the official said it is, quote, difficult to share and declined to comment on what a future-oriented alliance entails. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
In other news, Defense Minister nominee An Yu-baek will consider restoring the suspended September 19th military agreement between the two Koreas. Addressing members of the media earlier on this Friday ahead of his confirmation hearing, An said South Korea should first seek civil-level exchanges with North Korea and then advance to restoring the military accord to ensure peace on the Korean peninsula. When asked about his potential approach to the Trump administration, An spoke of adopting a proactive, positive posture based on national interests. Meanwhile, Vice Defense Minister Lee Do-hee, during his inauguration ceremony also on this Friday, reaffirmed the importance of a practical approach. He said the military here must seek practical cooperation to boost deterrence based on the ROK-US alliance and to defend national interests. China has reportedly accepted thousands of North Korean workers this year. This is according to a report by Japan's Yomiuri Shimbun on this Friday. The report claims about 3,000 workers arrived in Jilin by the end of March and 500 more workers in Liaoning by May. Most of them are said to be young women working in clothing and seafood factories. The Japanese report links this latest development to China's search for affordable labor amid its economic challenges and its efforts to boost ties with North Korea. Meanwhile, the UN's 2017 sanctions ban North Korean labor in member states to thwart funding for the regime's nuclear and missile programs. The Unification Ministry here has urged Pyongyang to inform Seoul in advance of any intention to discharge water from a dam across the border. Making note of past agreements between the two Koreas to fight flash flooding during the monsoon season, the ministry emphasized that early notification would serve to prevent accidents arising from sudden surges in water levels of the Imjingang River that flows from the north to the south. Back in 2009, an unannounced release of water from North Korea's Hwanggang Dam near the border resulted in the loss of 6 South Korean lives. At the Parliament on this Friday, plenary session took place to fill the leadership posts of standing committees, including those of the Budget and Judiciary, which both remain under the DP. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young has more.
Amid a bipartisan deadlock over the redistribution of standing committee chairs, the ruling Democratic Party unilaterally filled 4 of 5 vacant posts in a plenary session on Friday. The chair positions at the Budget and Accounts, Legislation and Judiciary, House Steering, Culture, Sports and Tourism, and Strategy and Finance committees were vacant. Of these, 4 positions, excluding the Strategy and Finance Committee, were filled by DP lawmakers, maintaining the party's control over them from the past year. 3-term DP lawmaker Han Byung-do was appointed chair of the Special Committee on Budget and Accounts and will lead the review of the supplementary budget proposal. 4-term DP lawmaker Lee Chun-seok was named chair of the Legislation and Judiciary Committee. The main opposition People Power Party walked out of the session as it had been calling for a rebalancing of the committee's leadership, arguing that the shift in government following the recent snap presidential election justified the change. The PPP insisted it should hold the chairs of the Judiciary and Budget committees to provide checks and balances on the ruling party.
The supplementary budget is an important issue, so the PPP is willing to cooperate to quickly elect a new budget committee chair. For the other committee chairs, we believe more talks are needed to restore cooperation and bring back the National Assembly's tradition of checks and balances.
The Democratic Party, however, has maintained that the current arrangement should remain, citing last year's agreement between the two parties on a 2-year term for committee chairs.
The People Power Party is delaying the Prime Minister's confirmation and budget review over the Legislative and Judiciary Committee chair. Don't they see people are struggling with a sluggish economy? Shouldn't they help the new government get to work?
With the Budget and Accounts Special Committee chair now in place, the review of the supplementary budget proposal is expected to gain momentum. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung reiterated his words of gratitude to the country's patriots for their selfless service during a luncheon on this Friday at Cheong Wa Dae. Our presidential office correspondent Song Yoo-jin covers the occasion.
2 days after the 75th anniversary of the Korean War, President Lee Jae-myung hosted a lunch on Friday to mark National Patriots and Veterans Month. 160 guests, including recipients of National Merit and their families, were invited to Cheong Wa Dae, the site of the former presidential office.
일제 치하의 독립운동, 그리고 6.25 전쟁, 4.19 혁명, 월남전, 5.18 민주화운동, 서해 수호의 역사를 통해서 오늘의 대한민국이 있습니다.
President Lee introduced some of the honorees by name and asked for a round of applause in recognition of their sacrifices. At the heart of his speech was a pledge to better honor and repay their service, which he says has been far too neglected until now.
우리 국가 공동체의 존속 그리고 우리 국가 구성원들의 더 나은 삶과 안전, 생명을 위해서 희생하신 것에 대해서는 우리 국가 공동체 구성원 모두가 특별한 관심과 애정으로 상응하는 보상을 하고 예우해야.
This is something President Lee pledged during his candidacy, promising to review and improve compensation and medical care for those who have helped safeguard the nation as well as their families. The menu included dishes prepared with abalone, crabs, and short ribs. The presidential office says Friday's event was to express gratitude and respect by providing the highest honors to those who gave everything to protect their country. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
For those of you who have yet to make weekend plans, as rain is in the forecast here, how about binge watching the final season of Squid Game, which was just released about an hour ago? Our Choi Seong has some of the highlights.
In Season 2, Song Gi-hoon joined the game again, but failed to foment a rebellion and even lost his best friend. His fate is now decided in Season 3.
Ki-hoon changes and makes up his mind. This is what I can do, and decides to take action based on that belief.
The conflicts and stories of the main characters push to the edge between life and death are key points to watch. In particular, many viewers have been looking forward to the showdown between Ki-hoon and the frontman Hwang In-ho, the surprise central figure of Season 2.
All the characters' interactions and stories will finally explode in Season 3, so I believe it makes up for any disappointments from Season 2.
Season 3 centers on the clash of values between Ki-hoon and the frontman, Hwang In-ho, individual survival or collective cooperation. This ideological conflict began to take shape in Season 2, and how this conflict ends is a key point to watch.
In Season 3, new Korean games that were not featured in previous seasons are introduced in the survival game. Moreover, beyond survival, a key point to watch is how unique Korean emotions and culture in Squid Game make it stand out.
Season 2 also introduced many new games. But in Season 3, what's more important is how the characters' personal stories unfold and what message they ultimately deliver. The key point is how much emotional impact those stories and each characters can create.
The 6-episode season was released all at once on June 27th at 4 p.m. Korean Standard Time. With Season 3, Squid Game has begun its final dance, bringing a 4-year-long journey to an end. Choi Hyung, Arirang News.
And now let's move from the screen to the stage. A talented teenage composer is seeking to blur the boundaries between traditional Korean musical instruments and contemporary musical compositions. Our Yooni has more.
19-year-old classical music composer Lee Hanurij has unveiled his first traditional Korean music piece. He won the Bartók World Competition in Hungary when he was just 18. This young talent has also written a commissioned piece for pianist Lee Myun-chan, the youngest ever winner of the Van Cliburn International Piano Competition at just 18 years old in 2022. Now Lee has entered a completely new territory by composing his first piece for Korean traditional orchestra, a bold step that bridges tradition and modernity and breaks down the walls between Korean and Western music. The opportunity came when conductor Choi Soo-yeol, currently serving as the principal guest conductor of the Seoul Metropolitan Traditional Orchestra, invited Lee to write a piece. Choi describes the Korean Traditional Orchestra as a branch of contemporary music, a special genre that allows us to express the present through ancient instruments. Lee Hanurij's debut in the genre came to life through the Seoul Metropolitan Traditional Orchestra's concert, filling the Sejong Center for the Performing Arts on Thursday night with the richly layered and resonant sounds of kugak, Korea's traditional music. In an interview with representatives from the Sejong Center, Lee described his piece as an attempt to construct an entirely different kind of sentence using the vocabulary of kugak, one that unfolds loosely, hazily, without clear peaks or dramatic climaxes. Lee Hanurijh, premiering his work Unselected Ambient Loops 2525, his debut composition for a Korean traditional orchestra, experimentally explores the unique tones and sonic possibilities of traditional instruments. Quoting him, in this piece the loop functions more like a memory, fading, warping, and merging into new contexts yet never entirely vanishing. As pianist Lee Myun-chan puts it, he's one of the most outstanding composers of our time. The future of the music world isn't just bright, it's dynamically unpredictable. Yooni, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. The White House has announced that there is no evidence showing enriched uranium was removed from the sites it targeted in Iran. On Thursday, local time, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stated that U.S. intelligence had monitored the sites in Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan before Saturday's strikes and found no indication that any enriched uranium had been moved before the attacks. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth echoed those assurances at a Pentagon briefing, saying he was not aware of any intelligence to suggest nuclear material was relocated. President Trump also took to Truth Social on Thursday morning, reaffirming that nothing was taken out of the facility. This stance confronts claims from satellite imagery and some experts suggesting heavy truck activity near the Fordo entrance, possibly indicating a removal of uranium ahead of the attacks. A senior Iranian official told Reuters that a significant portion of Iran's 60% enriched uranium may have been relocated to undisclosed sites in advance. Speaking before the General Assembly during a ceremony marking the 80th anniversary of the signing of the organization's charter, Guterres said global actors are selectively observing the document's rules when it suits and ignoring them when it does not. He described this as a danger to the foundations of international relations, stating the charter is not an a la carte menu and its violation must not be normalized. The Secretary General urged member states to recommit to core principles, including sovereignty, non-aggression, protection of civilians, and the rule of international law. U.S. diplomat McCoy Pitt acknowledged the UN's successes over 8 decades, but underscored its failure to contain current wars and urged a renewed dedication to the Charter as a continuing call to action. Shubhanshu Shukla, a 39-year-old group captain in the Indian Air Force, boarded the International Space Station on Thursday, becoming the first Indian to do so and becoming only the second Indian in space since Rakesh Sharma in 1984. He traveled to the ISS as part of the Axiom 4 mission, operated privately by SpaceX, which lifted off on Wednesday. The mission places Shukla on a 2-week science run, working alongside U.S. astronaut Commander Peggy Whitson and astronauts from Poland and Hungary. Shukla called the view from space beyond expectations. France is introducing a ban on outdoor smoking effective July 1st, which prohibits nicotine use in public spaces frequented by children, including beaches, parks, and school entrances. The move aims to protect youths from secondhand smoke, with violators facing fines of up to $153. The French health minister stated where there are children, tobacco must disappear, underscoring the government's commitment to creating a smoke-free generation. The legislation builds on the 2008 indoor smoking ban and follows pilot bans already adopted by over 1,500 municipalities and numerous beaches. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
It would be nice if the weather was sunny this weekend, but there is rain forecast all over the country. Starting with the central parts of the country tomorrow morning, it will spread further south in the afternoon. Some central areas will continue to have rain until Sunday morning. As for the expected amount of rainfall, up to 40 millimeters of rain will fall in central regions and up to 60 millimeters in the south. The intensity of the rain will not be strong, but it will be accompanied by gusty winds and lightning around the south. Tomorrow morning will start warm with high humidity at 21 to 24 degrees Celsius all over the country. Highs will move up to 28 degrees in Seoul, Chuncheon, and Busan, 31 degrees in Gwangju and Jeju. It will also rain in the Seoul metropolitan area and western parts of Gangwon-do province early next week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.